The standoff between the federal government and tech giants Meta and Google continues after the passage of Bill C-18 aimed at helping shore up traditional media. It may have some unintended consequences. Jeff Elgie is CEO of Village Media. Jeff, thanks for being with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So let's just start with this standoff. And I guess the next leg of this could be, as threatened, that these big players sort of withdraw from Canada and you might go to Google and not find any Canadian news. Are you surprised that it took this turn?
Not really. I mean, the government's been working on this bill for years now, and certainly the platforms, meaning Google and Facebook, were pretty clear about what specific issues they had with the bill, and had kind of suggested this could be an outcome if the bill were to pass as it did. So it's not a huge surprise, a little bit more of a surprise to see Google follow suit, at least with the potential for them to leave. Definitely not a surprise with Facebook.
Obviously, well, not obviously, but one imagines that the intention of the bill is good in the sense of trying to kind of update to deal with a new reality of big tech players that do occupy the space. But we've heard from a lot of stakeholders, including in media, various forms, that it's kind of missing the mark a little bit and it'll stifle innovation. In your view, is Bill C-18 off the mark?
I do think it's off the mark. I think the fundamental problem with the bill is the whole premise of it in the early stages was that Google and Facebook came and stole our content. And that's really not true at all. As I'm sure you know, we as publishers want our content in those environments because we generate a lot of traffic, we build our audiences out of that, and of course then we make money with it. So I think if the bill from the beginning had said, you know, look, these two companies are drawing a huge amount of advertising spend out of the ecosystem in Canada, and that advertising spend used to help support journalism, and perhaps as good corporate citizens, Google and Facebook should contribute to a fund to support journalism. I think that makes sense, but I think this bill went about it all the wrong way, unfortunately.
Is there another way to do it? Because one of the realities, and companies like yours exist as new players, right? So evidence that there will be companies that find ways to thrive in this environment. The truth is, though, that the ad dollars have shifted and shrunk. Is there a future with what we think of as traditional media, or do they need to be replaced by those that can actually make a go of it in this environment?
Well, I think a lot of them are transforming. I mean, they are shifting to digital. You know, Global Mail is a great example of a publication who's done a good job with subscription, for example. Other publishers of newspapers are doing a great job in digital ad revenue, like Glacier Media, for example, as well. So I don't know that they necessarily have to die. I just think the business model has changed a lot, and so they have to shift fairly quickly with it. But, you know, we see lots of examples of new startups in Canada that are doing quite well and growing. We would be one of them. So there's certainly models that can work in this environment.
So where do you see this going from here? It already seems as though the government is kind of negotiating and in implementation will make some of the changes that the big tech companies want. Is it going to undermine its own bill? Is it going to get to a different place altogether?
It seems like that's what's happening. I mean, it seems like the things the platforms were asking for all along in the bill that were completely denied are now all of a sudden up for discussions through regulation. You know, but I don't know what's going to happen. I think the platforms' concerns are that it's too late, that it's already baked into the bill, and that they won't be able to address it sufficiently to satisfy their concerns.
Right.
So it's quite possible we'll see one or both pull from the industry.
Jeff, great to have your view on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You're
welcome.
Jeff
Elgie is CEO of Village Media. Time for the takeaway, and when rights collide. We were reminded again this week of the damage that can be caused when workers go on strike. The ports in BC affected by the labor disputes there account for 1/3 of the export traffic from this nation. Shutting them down for a couple of weeks is no small matter. It's estimated to have cost almost $6 billion in disrupted trade before it was resolved. But the reality is that whether it's teachers who leave students and families in the lurch, or healthcare workers forcing sick people to cross picket lines, or public servants creating delays in important services, a strike is really only effective if it causes at the least disruption and at the most real harm. By definition, a strike nobody was bothered by wouldn't be particularly useful as a bargaining tool. But when two sides in a dispute can't seem to reach agreement, it raises the perennial question of why we can't resolve these things better. A strike is supposed to be the last resort for workers who can't get their employer's attention. The idea is that it levels the playing field so that labor can occasionally remind owners that without them, the work simply doesn't get done. There's plenty of evidence that unionized workers do better when it comes to pay and benefits than non-unionized workers. But does that difference depend on the right to absolutely and completely disrupt the business when negotiations get tough? Would a binding system of arbitration, where the last stop is mediation with an impartial third party and the decision is final, really be so terrible? It's hard to see why both sides wouldn't welcome that kind of considered approach rather than negotiations that happen at the point of a proverbial spear. Unless, of course, it's because strikes can sometimes force outcomes that go beyond good sense and reason. My takeaway? There are some situations where negotiation under fire isn't actually your best option. When it comes to jobs that affect us all, it could be that an orderly truce will feel like victory. That's Taking Stock for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.